and welcome to this explainer video on applied skills exam technique. My name is Jo Tuffill and I'm an expert tutor for the ACCA. In this explainer video, I'm going to cover four main areas. I'm going to talk about applied skills in general and what a step up they are. I'm also going to be looking at how to approach objective test questions, and then looking at constructed response questions approaches to the spreadsheet and the word processor, specifically looking at mark allocation. Finally, I'm going to look at what to do if I mess up my time management. I hope you find this useful.
So the applied skills exams are really the first real challenge in your ACCA journey. They are a significant step up from knowledge papers. Here now, the application of the knowledge is key to passing. If you do not apply the knowledge that you learn, you will not be able to pass the applied skills papers. And this is the challenge. Students find it hard to take that learned knowledge and apply it to questions effectively. There are also three pitfalls for students in thinking they can pass these applied skills papers on either passing on the MCQs, passing just on the numbers, and being able to question spot. 4 out of the 5 sessional papers have 60% MCQ. This may sound a lot, but in order to pass on those MCQs, you're going to have to get over 80% of them right. This is a significant challenge. They also have potentially 50% numbers and 50% discursive, and they have lots of syllabus areas that students feel they don't need to look at to be able to pass the paper. These are all pitfalls. You really mustn't fall into thinking that you can pass on the MCQs, pass just on the numbers, and you can question spot. So do not avoid the topics you dislike. Why don't you bet to win? For instance, in performance management, students tend to avoid transfer pricing. In financial management, they don't like business valuations. You cannot bet that they won't come up. You have to bet that they do come up and not avoid the topics you dislike. If they don't come up, then you win. But if they do come up, you will have revised those topics and you will be ready and prepared to tackle the question and get a pass. I'm now going to discuss the exam technique required in approaching objective test questions. Remember, 4 out of the 5 sessional papers have 60% MCQ, with auditor assurance having 30%. It's important to approach these in a systematic and effective way. First of all, use your time effectively. Focus on the easy marks. In Section A, there are 30 marks, 15 MCQs. There will be some easy ones, some mediocre ones, and some hard ones. We need to focus on those easier marks. So the technique will be to flag and move on. So you may find that you've got 8 out of the 15 classed as easier marks for you, and then the 7 are slightly harder for you. You need to leave those harder marks to the end of your time. Actually, often when you go back, you may find them slightly easier than you thought. Do not focus on any hard marks until you've gone through all 15 questions, scooping up those easy marks first. And so the way to do that is to guess, flag, move on. Come back to it at the end of your time. And please do not go over time on that section at the detriment of the easier marks in Section B and Section C. Secondly, you must look out for distractors. Understand why the distractors are there and build a review of them into your question practice. The distractors are there because they're common mistakes and you will always fall for common mistakes, think you've got the right answer. So it's important in your practice to understand why they're there, so you don't fall for them in the real exam. Do not rush through, therefore. Going through systematically and calmly will mean that you're more likely to pick the right answer and not miss out a step. You must reread the question before you select the answers. That is very important because you may spot something that you missed before, and that will stop you selecting the incorrect answer and revise your understanding or calculations to get the correct one. Here I have two examples from the financial management syllabus. First example is Drumlin Company. And here it says, what is the theoretical value of a right per existing share to 2 decimal places? Now, if you hadn't read this carefully, you might have just read, what is the theoretical value of a right? But you need the per existing share because that changes the answer. You also need to read it says to 2 decimal places, so your roundings have to be correct to get this answer right. Again, rereading the question would have stopped you falling for the distractor. Number 2 says which 2 of the following are descriptions of basis risk. Now again here, if you don't select 2 correct ones, you won't get the 2 marks. If you select just 1 that's correct, there are 0 marks for that. You will not get 1 mark for getting 1 correct. You have to get 2 correct. So again, the importance of reading the question carefully and selecting 2 answers. Now the next question we're looking at is from the performance management syllabus, specifically cost volume profit analysis. What they're requiring here is to find the total sales revenue that's needed to make a profit of $450,800. We've got 4 options here. Now the answer is D, where you're going to take the profit, add it to the fixed costs and divide by the contribution sales ratio. However, there are 3 distractors there, and they're all common mistakes that students will make. Understanding why those distractors are there is really important for your studying so that you don't fall into those traps when you get into the real exam. Now we're moving on to good spreadsheet technique. This is a constructed response area of the applied skills exams, where you're required to use a spreadsheet to format your answer and present it to the examining team. Now with the spreadsheet, there's no need to use a specific format, only recommended formats. You need to label your workings and use headings. Markers can see the formulas in the cell, and you must expand your columns and format numbers. This will aid the marker. If you want to be quick and efficient, try using copy and paste when you have to use repeated calculations. Make sure you highlight your answers and label them clearly, and then practice using the functions in the spreadsheet. For instance, in financial management, the net present value function and the IRR function are real time savers. I'm now going to show you a walkthrough of Candy Co. This is from the financial management syllabus, and it's specifically looking at working capital. So here I am on the practice platform, and I'm looking at the September-December 2021 past exam paper. So this question, Candy Company, has 5 requirements in 3 parts. And the first 3 requirements are using this spreadsheet. So I have completed part 1 for you, the bulk purchase discount. And I'm showing you here some top tips for how to complete this effectively and quickly. Now, the bulk purchase discount asks us to compare the current policy with the future policy. It will involve the same calculations therefore. So you need to lay it out so that you can quickly copy the same calculations that you're doing for the current policy into the new policy, but just change the variables. There is no need to write out the formulas that you're calculating for the purchase cost, the order cost, and the holding costs. I can see those by interrogating the cells. So it would completely waste time if you were to type out order costs, for instance, the cost per order times by the demand divided by the order quantity. I can see that by clicking on that cell as a marker, which I'll do now. I've not wasted time writing that out because it's in the cell. I've done the same for the holding cost. So the holding cost here is 9% of the purchase price times by the average inventory. I have not written that out. That will take time. You need to be able to show this effectively and quickly by using labeling and then using the formula functionality within the cells. What I was then able to do is then copy this across by using copy and paste. And then all I had to then do is change those parameters. So for the new policy, I obviously need to type in new, and then I needed to change the purchase price because the purchase price is going to be cheaper because we're going to be getting a discount. So the discount is 1.5%. So I'm just going to go equals 30 times by 0.985. Therefore, it's now 98.5% of the cost. As you can see, that automatically then changed the holding cost, and it automatically then changed the purchase cost. Again, I need to change that to say new, so I'm just going to reference it. I then need to change the quantity to be the 1500, and again, it will automatically change everything that's affected in there, which it has done. I then need to just check any other parameters are changing. And if you check the question, the order cost is going to go up by 25. So that needs to go up to 100. And the holding cost is now going to be 10% of the purchase price. So I need to change that to be 0.1. And there you have it. That was so much quicker than retyping the formulas. Also, I like you to highlight key figures so the marker is clear on the calculations you've made. And again, clearly labelled the total cost of the current policy, the total cost of the new policy. And then reread the question to check you've answered it correctly. It says calculate the financial effect of accepting the bulk purchase discount. So therefore the financial effect needs to be pulled out and that needs to be highlighted too. And it's a saving because the current cost is higher than the new cost. So hopefully you can see by clearly labelling the cells, you do not need to write out formulas, but you do need to make sure that you're using the spreadsheet effectively and making sure that you're referencing cells so the marker can see where your figures have come from. This is so important because of those own figure rule marks. Any mistakes can then be followed through by using the formulas in the cells. And therefore you only get penalised at the first mistake. Remember, practice makes perfect, so you must practice using this spreadsheet. Now we come on to written questions technique. Again, this is in the constructed response area of the applied skills exams. It's really important to master this technique. It is an application exam, not a knowledge exam. So knowledge statements do not get marks. They have to be explained and applied to the question when required. So here I have an example from the performance management syllabus. Points need to be fully explained. Always think because and why. So a question that you may get in the performance management exam is what is an advantage of incremental budgeting? Well, we could make a statement which says, it is quick. That is a correct statement. It is quick. But we haven't explained it, so it gets no marks. We need to know why it is quick. The examining team need to know that you understand that statement. And it's because you take the reliable figures from last year and apply an inflation uplift. 1 mark. That's why it is quick. Hopefully you can see the difference in those answers. There are no half marks for the written sections. I now want to look at performance evaluation questions. This technique can be applied to performance management exams, financial reporting exams, and financial management exams, where you're asked to look at performance evaluation. The technique you need to use is calculate what and why. Now, the calculation will get you half a mark. The what is a setup. It's not a mark. It's the why, i.e. the application of the ratio and the what is happening, gets a mark. You have to explain the what. Have a look at this example. So here I have colour-coded the calculate, the what and the why. So you can see gross margin has improved by 15%. That is the what. That gets no marks. Margin's now at 42.4 versus 37.2 in 2085. That is the calculate. That gets half a mark for each of those ratios. This is due to the expansion of the higher margin business into cloud computing. So the why then gets 1 full mark. Unless you have the why, you do not get the mark for writing. Here's another example. 337% increase in customer complaints, which is very worrying. The half a mark is for that ratio. The what, which is very worrying, gets no marks. Explaining what's going on, therefore then gets the 1 mark. This is more than likely connected with the late deliveries performance, which has dropped by 20%. So here is the format of what to follow for a performance evaluation question. First of all, you must use a table for your ratios. Clearly label those ratios and show any workings for complicated ratios. Number 2, then plan a spread of points. Use those headings. Always talk about revenue. Always talk about margins. Look at any main cost changes. If they're asking you to look at return on investment, then please calculate that. And if you're looking at financial position, please make sure you calculate gearing. There may be some non-financial indicators also to do some linking to those financial indicators. You must always conclude. The conclusion will get you up to 2 marks. Remember, this is a performance evaluation, explaining what is happening. It's not offering advice, so do not fall into the trap of offering advice. It's purely about evaluating performance. Now here is an example from the performance management exam. This question is flag company and it's from the September-December 2021 sittings. And I'm going to show you how you get marks and you don't get marks for your written answers. Just to give you a quick overview, this is about 2 airlines, Flag Company and Budget Company. Flag Company is a premium long-haul airline. Budget Company is a low-cost short-haul airline. This narrative needs to be used in your answers. You've been given some information to calculate ratios, and you'll get half a mark per ratio that's calculated. So we're going to do a spread of ratios, always do revenue, always do operating profit margins, and then you can look at those non-financial ones, which is fuel usage and occupancy. Now let's look at revenue and operating margin. How do we get marks? Well, first of all, for calculating those operating margins, you'd get half a mark each. But would you get a mark for this? If you look at the revenue and operating margin, flag company is performing better than budget on these indicators. No, that gets 0 marks. It's just a statement of fact. There's no explanation. If you look at the revenue and operating margin, flag company is performing better than budget on these indicators. Revenue is 170%, operating profit is 5 basis points more. Again, that is 0 marks, but you will get half a mark for that extra ratio you've calculated, which calculates that revenue is 170% more for flag than it is for budget. You're still making a statement. This now gets marks. It's the why. Flag is a larger and established company operating in the premium sector for business travel, commanding higher fares, which will be the main reason for its revenue, 1 mark, and operating margin being double that of budget, which is a low-cost airline selling at low prices, 1 mark. You can clearly see the difference, hopefully, in those answers, and what gets marks and what doesn't. Here is another example based on passenger occupancy. We again get half a mark for each of those calculations, but we get 0 marks for this because it's a statement of those ratios. It's not explaining. It's the explanation that gets the mark. This is because budget is a low-cost airline and is maximising occupancy by offering a low-cost seat to achieve high volume. Please make sure you explain and apply to the scenario. Now I want to talk about time management in exams. This is probably the most common reason why students do not pass. This is an extract from my exam performance for financial management exam. I'm specifically looking at the time management area. This time management area shows how many marks they achieve for each section of the paper. That equates to 14 marks for section A, 10 marks for B, and 18.5 marks for C. They received 43%, and so they failed. And I'm now looking at time management to see why. So this student started with section C, and they spent 104 minutes on it. They then progressed to section A and spent 40 minutes. And then finally, section B, 36 minutes. I suggested that time management-wise, they should have been spending 80 minutes in section C. So 24 minutes overtime on that section. 50 minutes on section B, and so they underspent time significantly on section B. And again, 50 minutes in section A, and they underspent 10 minutes time on section A. This is showing why that student failed to pass. They didn't manage their time effectively. You cannot spend too much time on one particular section. This is where you're finding the harder marks at the detriment of those easier marks. Please make sure you allocate your time effectively. Now, what do you do when time management goes wrong? Let's suppose you're in a financial management exam and you've completed section A and C, and you're now looking at running out of time on section B. So with section B, there are 3 topics, so you should pick your best to tackle first. You should think about looking at calculations versus discursive. Calculations take longer. Discursive questions are quicker. You could also look at the difficulty of questions. Often there are 2 easier questions, 1 mediocre, and 2 harder questions. And I would traffic light those green, amber, and red. Here is a question from the financial management exam, specifically business valuations. The 5 questions can be split into 3 calculations and 2 discursive. Why not tackle those 2 discursive questions first, because they get equal marks for the calculations. They don't take as long. Why not instead approach this by traffic lighting the case study? The 2 green, 1 amber and 2 red reflect the difficulty. The first 2 here are basic calculations from the syllabus. These should be relatively simple and quick to do for a well-practiced student. My amber one is number 4. This is again a very common area of the syllabus, and there's a technical article on this area. The final 2, 3 and 5 are difficult. Students tend to find valuing debt instruments quite tricky. The process is long and involved, with lots of little traps to fall into along the way to get that final answer. Number 5, again, is a technical article and a podcast, but it's a peripheral subject of the syllabus and tends to get missed by students. So there you have it, my 2 green, my 1 amber and my 2 red. You need 6 marks out of the 10. And so going for those red marks is not the best use of your time. Now, what do you do when time management goes wrong and you've left section C till last? Well, I would recommend focusing on the written sections first, because this is where you're going to gain the most number of marks for the time. But what you must remember never to do is to use bullet points. Bullet points do not receive marks. They need to be full sentences and explained. So there's no point in writing down bullet points. You are better off constructing a full sentence, taking the time to get that 1 mark. After you've tackled those written sections, then go to the calculations, and you'll need to assume issues away for things you can't do or you think are going to take time. Let me show you some examples. So here's an example from the financial management syllabus. It says here, critically discuss with reference to relevant theory the view of Director A and B on raising new finance. Now this is for 6 marks. So 6 marks requires 6 points, 6 full sentences, no bullet points. So Tanza Company here has 2 directors, and the theories that they're talking about are to do with capital structure theory, to do with gearing in the company. Director A is talking about Modigliani and Miller with tax, and Director B is talking about the traditional theory. Here we have to focus on the basics. 6 points, 6 marks. You need the easy marks from the 2 directors if you're running out of time. So firstly, correctly linked to the relevant theory would be 1 mark. Because it says critically discuss, you'll need a pro and a con. And so number 2, explain why the theory is relevant to the view would be 1 mark. And then the con, explain why the theory is not relevant, would also be 1 mark. So here in the word processor, split your page, Director A, Director B. Get the 2 easy marks first on both Director A and B, then the 2 second easy marks, and therefore you then don't need the 2 final marks. You get the 4 out of the 6. That is efficient use of your time when you're running out of time. Now let's suppose you've done the written sections and you're now come to the calculations. And in order to get through this effectively and efficiently to gain the most number of marks, sometimes you have to assume issues away. This is an example from the financial management syllabus, and it's a weighted average cost of capital calculation. This shows the importance of learning formats, because you can fill in numbers and get that final calculation. Calculating those market values are relatively simple, but calculating those cost of capitals can be quite lengthy. So you could assume those away if you're running out of time, and therefore still get those own figure rule marks for calculating the final calculation for WACC. This approach can be applied to most of the calculation elements of the applied skills exams. If you're finding it hard to get the final figure to finish your calculation, then assume that figure away to make sure that you get the final calculation in some format that they have to give you those own figure rule marks. Thank you for listening and watching this video explaining exam techniques for the applied skills exams.